Hi, this is Artists at Work, and I'm your host, Andrew Pa. With me today is Terri Kent from Kent State University, where she is the coordinator of the musical theater program and the producing artistic director of Porthouse Theatre. Welcome, Terri.
Thank you, Andrew.
So I'm so thrilled to have you here today because we get to talk about something that is very dear to both of us, and that's Porthouse Theatre. But also, I wanted to take this opportunity to talk to you about how you got into theater. So was that, as you were a young person, frequently that's when we start really getting into the arts. Was that the case for you, or did it kind of start a little bit later, or?
No, it started right away. When I was 3, my mom enrolled me in dance lessons. I took piano lessons. I was in the marching band. I was always interested in theater, and I directed many dance recitals on the neighbor's porch. And I used to play all the albums of Broadway shows on the console stereo in the living room and direct all my brothers in the shows.
That's great. So did you, as you started to get more interested in theater, did you start really doing some formal shows in high school? Did you do some local productions, or were you really interested in that directing?
My brother talked me into auditioning for a play when I was a freshman in high school. He was a sophomore, and they didn't have very many people, and we were doing MASH. So I auditioned, and I got cast as Hot Lips, and that kind of was the beginning of it then. And so I did plays on and off through high school, and continued with the choir, continued with band. So my interest expanded, and when I went to college, I actually majored in speech and communications, but everyone thought I was a theater major because I was so heavily involved in theater. I just was, at that point in time, not sure that that was the direction I was going with my career.
Mm-hmm.
And after that, I went on to graduate school and at Kent State for 3 semesters, transferred to Michigan State, where I received my MFA in acting.
Okay. Well, that's so great. I mean, my path was similar, except I pretty much knew I wanted to do orchestra and violin and music. But I started playing in a lot more of like musical theater productions and things like that. And I've really lately, I think one of the things I really love is playing musical theater productions and also doing opera. And right now I'm in the midst of an opera, Puccini's La Bohème, which is just a gorgeous gorgeous masterwork for the repertoire.
It would be great to run that simultaneously with Rent.
Yes.
But you played in the orchestra for me for several shows.
Yes, I've played in several, Little Women, Newsies, and I've subbed in for some other shows, and it's always a treat to be there. So after you graduated with your MFA at Michigan, where did your life take you? Where did your career take you?
I was working simultaneously while I was in graduate school at the Boar's Head Theater in Lansing, Michigan. It's now closed, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, but it's where William and Mary Beth Hurt got their starts. And so I was an equity actor working with them while I was finishing my graduate training. And I had thought about staying there, but I ended up moving to Milwaukee for a short period of time. Wisconsin is a right-to-work state, so I was able to get some immediate on-camera experience and then branch out into Chicago once I had a few things on my resume. And then from there, I came back to Cleveland briefly, and then I took a teaching position at SUNY Stony Brook.
Oh, wow. So you've lived kind of all over in the north. Actually, one of my really good friends, she does opera. She kind of did the same thing. She was in Milwaukee. She went to grad school there, and then she went down and started to get active in the Chicago scene. And now she's down there singing with some of the local opera companies and doing things like that. So I think that's a interesting way to see that. And it's still, doing that, almost 20, 30 years later. That's still a path that people choose to take. So what about what time were you then at Stony Brook? What year?
Well, let me think. It was a long time ago. It would have been like 1988, 89, okay. 90. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to travel to India as a Fulbright professor.
Yes.
So I was there for a while, and then I came back and landed the job at Kent State.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit more of what you did in India?
My job was to teach American culture through the arts. So I directed 2 shows. I directed Macbeth in Madurai, India, outside, and I directed Steel Magnolias in New Delhi. I did that with the Lady Shri Ram College. And what was fascinating about that production was that everything from the design to the costumes to the acting to the stage management was done by all women. And then even in that time period in the 1990-91, the oppression of women was still prominent. And so it was really something that this was an all-female oriented production.
Wow, that's really incredible. So were you there for a year?
No, actually I was there for a semester because the Gulf War started while I was there. So I had the option of returning or staying indefinitely. But it was actually, my time in India was life-defining. When I was there, the government fell. And so twice I was on a train on my way to the Taj, and both times curfew was called and we were ordered off the train. And the college students were protesting the caste system and the effects of the caste system on higher education. And so I had the horrific experience of watching a group of students turn a bus upside down, and a young woman climbed on top of the bus, doused herself in gasoline, and set herself on fire. And someone, coincidentally, from the embassy happened to be near me, pulled me to a safe location, and I remember telling him, his name was Walter, and I had stayed in touch with him for years, but now I've lost track of him. But I said I should have been a doctor or a lawyer. I should have joined the Peace Corps. I mean, I'm wasting my life. And he said something that changed my life. He said, if these young people had any means of self-expression, they would not have to kill themselves to be heard. And so I made a commitment then and there that if I made it back home safely, that I would commit my life to the education of young artists and making sure young people had a voice so that they didn't have to resort to violence.
Yeah, that's inspiring, and something good came out of something so heart-wrenching.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's unfortunate you couldn't stay there longer to continue your work, because I think you could have helped give some of those young people more of that expression. But so you ended up coming back to the U.S. and then you went to Kent after that.
Right.
So, and now you've been there ever since.
28 years, 28 going on 29.
That's absolutely incredible. And you have, at first you said originally you started as a visiting professor, but then the next year
So
became
this is
full-time.
a great story. So my family is from this area, and so I wanted to come home for the summer, and so I flew in and auditioned at Kane Park for Guys and Dolls. And it so happened that my husband, Ron Thomas, but I didn't know him at the time, played Nathan Detroit. So this is the couple who've been engaged for 14 years, and they finally get married, and 3 days after the show closed, we eloped. And so that's how we got together, and then a visiting professorship opened up at Kent, and I took it primarily because, well, I was very interested in coming back to Kent, where I'd spent 3 semesters, but had learned so much from working at Porthouse, from the instructors there who were my very dear friends for many years after, but also because Ron had 2 little boys, and I didn't want to take him far away from them. So this worked out, and I stayed, and I couldn't be happier.
And I don't think we could be happier either. It's
well, thank you.
Wonderful to have you. It's been wonderful to work with you there as well, because I've also spent, like I said, I've spent 3 summers out there, twice as company management and then also as a performer. And in both worlds, it was so similar but so different to be behind stage, to see the action. And there's so much energy out at Porthouse, and there's so much energy really at the School of Theater and Dance too. It's just incredible to see, and I think you're inspiring to the students and the people who come. And I think that really helps feed the energy of both places and keeps that it's a different vibe, but a very similar kind of energy.
Well, the founding fathers of Porthouse, Bill Zucchero and Lou Erdman, were both my teachers and influential in my life, and also Alan Benson. All three of them have passed away, but they created a theater based on the values of the small American business, which means family-oriented. And that really touched me, influenced me, changed how I thought about theater. And so how remarkable that I got to pick up the torch and carry it forward. And every day that I step into rehearsal, I step into class, I step on the Porthouse stage, I remember what they taught me and what they stood for, and I hope that, and ask for guidance to continue that spirit. And I think that we now have a group of people, and like people attract similar people, and so I always feel like we have a family of connected spirits.
Yeah, it's just such an incredible space to be at. So back to the founding of Porthouse Theatre. It was founded in 1968 as one of the Kent Blossom art programs. And then it's actually had its first real debut season as an Elizabethan style
strolling players.
Yeah, strolling players in 1969, and they were strolling actually on the grounds of the Blossom Music Center, correct? So what would something like that have maybe looked like, or if you have any specific memory of maybe something they did?
Well, they would do exactly that, stroll on the grounds. They would sing Elizabethan songs. They might do a sonnet or a monologue or act out a short scene. So they were like a band of strolling players who had, 6 or 7 options that they could pull out as they traveled, and repeated their performances, from group to group. We do a similar thing still at Porthouse around the 3rd show of the season, where our members of our Porthouse Academy perform a green show, which means they're on the green lawn and they sing or serenade our patrons.
Yeah, that's great that you're able to continue that tradition. And actually, I didn't know that until you just told me that kind of helps stem from that tradition.
Absolutely.
Well, and then finally in 1970, they started actually building the actual theater that we know today, the Octagon, correct?
Yep, that's right.
But they actually did their first season in a tent.
They did, in what is currently a parking lot.
Yes, currently a parking lot.
So they did perform in the tent, and I believe the Golden Boys was one of the shows that summer. You can, from pictures, you can see in the background Porthouse Theatre being constructed. And that was made possible actually by a gift from Bobby and Cy Porthouse, which was the seed money for that theater. And the Porthouse family since then has continued that legacy. The late David Porthouse and his wife Jackie were very dear friends of mine. Jackie continues to be a dear friend, and their daughter Lisa and her brother David continue the legacy, and their children.
Yeah, I mean, I've had the opportunity to meet them out at Porthouse, and it's just so great to see the name, some places' namesake, and seeing the family still, supporting something that their forefathers, their forebears, actually helped bring to life.
That's right.
It's just incredible to continue seeing that. And I know over the years, multiple families have actually stepped in to help to support Porthouse and some of the endeavors, the Hackett family.
Absolutely. Greg and Beth have been incredible. In fact, we have the Hackett Pavilion, but they also made the lead gift for our $1 million campaign that we're about to wrap up, which allowed us to build a new box office, renovate the restrooms, expand the parking lot, and then we still have our additional parking lot, which hopefully will be done not for this season, but for the summer of 2019.
Yeah, that's going to be so great. I mean, someone who worked company management and dealing with the parking, it's always difficult, but I think that's also something that added to the charm.
Right. Well, when I started, there were less than 400 subscribers.
Yeah.
And now we have over 4,000 subscribers.
Yes.
So I remember when the parking lot didn't fill up. And now we have people parked on the lawn, hiking a quarter of a mile into the theater, and we need to expand our facilities to meet the growing donors and patrons that the theater
Yeah.
has acquired over the years.
Yeah, because now this season, since it was founded in 1968, it's actually the 50th anniversary.
It is.
Which is just absolutely fantastic that this theater and overall the Blossom art programs have continued for this long. I mean, we have Camp Blossom Music, Camp Blossom Art, and then Porthouse Theatre, which is part of that. And we didn't get a chance to talk very much about the educational component, but could you just talk a little bit more about the academies?
Sure. Well, I have to back up and tell you that my first paid acting job was at Porthouse Theatre in 1983 and 1984. I also worked as the marketing assistant in 1983.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the next year they just kept me in the acting company. They didn't think I was very good at it. And then I went away. And when I came back as artistic director, something that was very important to me was maintaining that educational component. So we developed first what was called the College Academy. And the reason I got this idea is, as being musical theater coordinator, trying to connect the two programs more, we have a lot of students who audition for the BFA program, and they have to pass voice, acting, and dance. Well, how much can you really tell about someone in 5 minutes? You know who's really good and you know who's not going to be able to do it. But there are a lot of people in the middle, in the gray area. So I got this idea. What if they came to the academy and they studied with us for 3 weeks, taking classes, understudy the shows, possibly assist or have a walk-on role? We would know a whole lot more about them. And then if they weren't right for the BFA musical theater program, we would have a stronger idea of what their strengths were, and we could redirect them into an avenue, whether it might be dance or vocal performance or acting or set design or lighting design or costume design, management, an area where they could really, really shine. So that's what was kind of the kickoff for the academy, the College Academy. And gosh, I don't even know how many years it's been going on now. 12 maybe?
I think that sounds
you
about right.
You might know better than me.
Because I did a little bit, helping with that as company management, trying to help Jen and Joni and little bits here and there of trying to do that. I think it's 12 or 13, maybe even 14 years.
And we average between like 16 and 25 students every year in the academy. And in all the years we've done it, there's only been one student who didn't enroll at Kent State from their experience. Then we decided to expand the program to a college or a high school academy, which is now morphed into a shadow program, so that we can provide specific experiences for high school students who are considering going to college to study some aspect of theater. And so much of that is made possible by the Cyrus Eaton Foundation, who support us tremendously, so that many of those students are able to come tuition free. But 4 years ago, we took a big step.
Yes.
And my very good friend and colleague, Jack Young Seo, is actually from South Korea. She is our lighting designer at Kent State University. And she said, what if we start an international academy?
Yeah.
And so 4 years ago, we launched that program. And we've had between 16 and 20 students every year. And they work side by side with the College Academy students. So they take dance together, they take ensemble singing together, and probably one of the greatest rewards of my time at Porthouse is seeing the Korean students and the American students standing side by side on the lawn, singing in both Korean and English.
Yes. That's been absolutely amazing for me to see too. It shows the connective power of the arts.
Absolutely.
Completely. It just shows the transformative power too, because frequently there is sometimes a bit of a language barrier, but I've also seen great friendships form between the college and the International Academy students.
And last summer I had an assistant director. There was a young woman who wanted to work on directing, and she wanted to assistant direct for me. Her name was Dong-ae. And I said, great, let's try it. And we could communicate. She couldn't take notes for me, and there was terminology that I had to explain later. But I had a model of the set of Newsies, which was all moving scaffolding. And so when I would plan things ahead, but things change in rehearsal.
Of
So
course.
I'm trying to figure out what would be the next configuration. And one day she just reached over and moved the pieces in such a beautiful and artistic way. And I said, oh my gosh, absolutely. So we tried this, and it was such a perfect choice, and one I would have never thought of. So every day I would put the model in front of her and I'd say, I have a question about these actors. So I was able to see this production or this story through international eyes and through a 20-year-old's perspective, which I think had a great deal to do with the success of the show. So I gave her a little necklace that has a map of Kent on it so that she could always find her way back home to me.
Yeah, that's just so incredible to hear stories like that, coming from the arts, coming from Porthouse.
Absolutely.
And, you know, the arts aren't always good about telling those kind of stories, you know, to the greater public. So I'm glad we're able to
Me too.
do that, you know. And I mean, I remember in your curtain speech, I remember you talking about that. And it was just so inspiring to hear, you know, even though I heard it multiple times, every night it was still just so nice to hear something like that and to really see the students interacting as company management, and then also backstage when they would come back.
Yes.
Because I remember them kind of doing a little bit of shadowing and things like that.
Right.
So that's just absolutely incredible to see. And actually we have one of the Porthouse shirts here, and Porthouse Purple.
That's right.
How did that purple color come about?
I don't know. That Porthouse Purple was there when I became artistic director. And so it was always Porthouse Purple. And then there was a time when the administration at Kent State wanted us to make Porthouse blue and gold like Kent State University, which of course I understand, but we always missed the Porthouse Purple. And then one day it just came back.
I think that might have been one of my first season working there. Is when I remember that the year before, I think they had been blue. And then I was talking to Joni and I said, what are we ordering?
Right.
And she said, I think and then we talked to you and we said, are we bringing the purple back this year?
Let's do it.
I remember doing that. And I think it had been back again since then, but they changed to a different color. And I think the last couple of seasons, it still remained that purple. And it's, again, another connection that really helps define Porthouse. And now we're getting into the 50th anniversary season. So let's talk a little bit about the shows that Porthouse is doing this summer. It's kind of it's a throwback to some of the past seasons. With the first show is Anything Goes, right?
Correct.
The second show is Next to Normal, and the third show is Oklahoma, which Oklahoma is probably one of the most well-known musicals anywhere outside of, you know, Sound of Music. It's just so well-known. The music is iconic. And I know the Porthouse production, when it originally was done, was very popular. So can you, for Anything Goes, let's talk about a little bit about just a snippet of the plot of each show, so we kind of know what they're all about.
Okay. Well, Anything Goes takes place on a cruise ship, and there are 3 different love stories involved, comic love stories, and there is a nightclub evangelist singer who is on board. And she kind of likes this guy, Billy Crocker. Billy Crocker is in love with Hope Harcourt, who is sailing. Hope Harcourt is engaged to Sir Evelyn Oakley. And then there's Mrs. Harcourt, her mother, and Elijah Whitney, the older couple. And then there's the stowaway gangster, Moonface Martin, public enemy number 13, and his gun moll, Irma. And so it's a whole tangled web. Billy's not supposed to be on the boat. He's supposed to be selling stock for Eli Whitney. So there's all of these comic interchanges. But as always, it ends up everyone's with the right person. Everyone lives happily ever after a huge tap number and several big production numbers.
Yeah. I don't actually know that show too well. Once you started talking about the plot and things, it started to spark memories of what it was about, but I have not actually seen that, so I'm really excited to come out and see it this summer. And then the middle show is Next to Normal.
And that's kind of our nod to the future, yeah.
Yes.
Our alumnus, Alice Ripley, who she was actually an undergraduate student when I was a graduate student, and I had her in an acting class. So we've remained friends all of these years. She won the Tony for playing Diana on Broadway. So I saw her off Broadway in the show as it changed, on Broadway, on tour, and it's a remarkable piece. It's not your typical summer stock. It's fairly dark. It deals with mental illness, depression, and a woman's struggle to find her way out of that.
Yeah.
It's a rock opera. It won the Pulitzer, and I hate to say too much more about the plot because I just think it's a piece that you have to go in and hear the story.
Yeah, it's very much a piece that what I've read about it, it needs to be experienced. And that's something I've actually noticed in past seasons. A lot of times that middle show is a show that it's difficult to really give it a good synopsis. You have to come and experience it to get the full view, to get the full impact of what that show is really trying to get across.
And our patrons love the big musicals. They love the American classical musicals. But at the same time, we feel a responsibility to continue their education and introduce, more contemporary works to them.
Yeah, because it's, the arts start to kind of die if we keep doing the same shows. Not that they're tired, not that they're not still relevant, but it's just good. It's nice to see that contemporary.
The art form continues to develop as technology does.
Yes.
And so we have to be serving our audiences, our tried and true, and also looking to build our future audiences. So.
Exactly. And then the final show is, of course, one of the American classical musicals, Oklahoma. And I don't know if you have to go too much through the plot, but just give a brief overview of what that show's about.
What's really interesting is this is the 75th year anniversary of Oklahoma. So they're celebrating as we celebrate the 50th. The story revolves around Laurie and a cowboy, Curly, who are attracted to each other, but like any young couple, test each other. And there's also some conflict between the cowboys and the farmers and how they have to be friends and work together. And there is a relationship between Ado Annie, who's a little loose, and Will Parker, and Allie Hackham. So she has two boyfriends. What's really interesting is that Oklahoma was the first show to really use a ballet to move the story forward.
Yes.
And it's not that it stops and we see a ballet. The ballet moves the story forward. And it's really interesting because Carousel Revival just opened on Broadway. And I happened to see it a few weeks ago. And they retained all of the dance music. So there are like 5 or 6 huge dance numbers and ballet numbers. And it is what I always imagined Broadway to be when I was a little girl. And then I just finished directing Allegro, which is one of the lesser known of their great shows. And we did it without the dance music. So I feel like I kind of have been submerged into this world, you know, of Rodgers and Hammerstein.
Well, that's so fantastic. And we're pretty close to the end of our time together. So where can people get tickets?
So season subscriptions are on sale now, and you can go online to www.porthousetheatre.com, or you can call the box office at 330-672-2497 and order a subscription. Single ticket sales do not go on sale until I believe May 28th.
Okay.
But the real deal is if you're going to see 2 shows, you might as well get a season subscription. It's the same price, and there are all kinds of perks to being a season subscriber.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Until next time, everyone, I hope I see you out at Porthouse.